Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where someone you've seen in the headlines a lot the past few days is Nate Parker, because he's doing the publicity rounds for The Birth of a Nation, which is finally hitting theaters this Friday. And the headlines, well, they're not going so well, because Nate Parker absolutely refuses to take any culpability for the rape scandal that happened, back when he was in college. And he is so vehement against having this associated with him in any way that he's getting angry, he's getting frustrated, and he's basically, as one of you tweeted back to me when there was a headline on Friday about the upcoming 60 Minutes interview where the headline was Nate Parker refuses to apologize for what happened. He always adds, I feel very bad about what happened, and to this woman who, committing suicide is really the poisonous cherry on top of the sundae that Nate Parker did not need. But he just says, I refuse to apologize for this. And that's what everyone uses as the headline. And one of you tweeted back and said, it's sad really that Nate Parker just refuses to die on this hill. I think he's emboldened by the narrative that some people have run with, that he is a victim of trying to take down, the black man, and that people are afraid of his movie and they're trying to take this film down. And that's why this is only surfaced now. Because, everyone says that's very suspicious. Nate Parker has been working for years. Why are people only talking about this now? Well, let's take a little break and I'll explain that to you. Nobody cared about Nate Parker until now. Nate Parker had small little roles in tiny movies that nobody went to see, and he wasn't really even the star of them. I think the biggest thing he did before this was Beyond the Lights with Gugu Mbatha-Raw, and while some people liked that movie, nobody paid attention to it, and at that time, Gugu Mbatha-Raw was the big deal about that movie. Everybody was focused on her. So Nate Parker, suddenly becomes this lightning rod of attention with The Birth of a Nation. And people are like, this is the most amazing movie ever. People are applauding it before they even see it, right? They're just like, I'm so happy this movie exists in theory that I'm going to give you a standing ovation. He swept Sundance, and going into award season, it seemed like he was going to win everything, right? This film was going to be the big winner. It had already been anointed. It was going to solve the Oscars so white problem that the Academy was suffering with for 2 years in a row. And he was already even invited into the Academy this year before even winning anything, right? Just on the strength of the buzz of this movie. So obviously, reporters who need a story, dig into him and they're like, well, let's learn more about Nate Parker. Somebody says, holy crap, the guy was charged with rape and he was acquitted or found innocent on the fact, and when you look at the details of it, it's just such a mess. But his co-writer, the writer on the movie, was found guilty, but then was, he asked for a retrial, and then the woman backed out. I mean, it's a really complex, ball of string situation here that we've discussed before. But anyway, that's a really juicy story, and that's why it came up now, because suddenly people care about who Nate Parker is. He was the golden boy of this year's award season, and so people looked for some tarnish on him, and they found a giant, black mark. So that's why I think that it only came up now. Now, I also see that the black community, because he was on Good Morning America this morning as well, are even divided on how they feel about Nate Parker. Some people feel that this is slander, but some people feel that, it's really unfortunate to see someone who could have done a lot for the community, self-destruct like this, to implode. Because as people are pointing out, why does he always say I was found innocent instead of I am innocent? I think he's doing it because he wants to prove that there was a legal finding, right? It wasn't just he said, she said. He's like, no, legally, by the courts, I was found innocent. And so I can understand where he's coming from in that regard. But I think that what Nate Parker doesn't understand is that sometimes people want to see you have a mea culpa, right? Or a come to Jesus moment where, you really, and I think that if he had done that a couple of weeks ago, over the summer, he could have put this to bed. This story would have gone away. I think that, he could have changed the conversation to, what campus culture is like, right? But, even when he talked about what he was like back then, he said, I was a dog, I wanted to see how many women I could sleep with. And that paints not such a great picture. And then when you see him in interviews now, he's so angry and so upset about having to answer these questions, and he does nothing to hide it. Like the 60 Minutes footage, the Good Morning America clip I saw this morning on Twitter was particularly bad. And his attitude, he doesn't come, even though he was found innocent, he comes across in a really negative manner, like someone you're like, I don't know about you personally, right? Like when you talk to Nate Parker and you see him discussing this, you're not like, oh, I just can't see him doing that, or he's obviously changed so much, he's a different man. I'm like, I see shades of whatever got you into trouble in the first place, and that's very problematic. I don't know if he wasn't willing to go to PR training to handle this, or if he got bad PR training. I'm sure Fox Searchlight would have paid for it, because they've already paid so much for this film, $17.5 million to acquire the distribution rights, the biggest Sundance deal of all time. Then they have to pay for the ad campaign for the movie, and they have to pay for the awards campaign for the movie. We're going to talk about awards campaigns at the end of today's episode, because fittingly, that's the viewer question. But I really feel that he is making this a problem. And again, as one of you tweeted to me, he's just decided to die on this hill. And he's going to take his movie down with him. I think that he should have taken a little bit of a loss with this rape scandal for the greater win. And then maybe I think he could have gotten past it, because I think the film is incredibly strong. But he's so negative and so refusing to even compromise on this situation that it's making me really hard for me to support him. I think after these interviews, he will never get an Oscar, maybe even a nomination. I don't think he'll win for sure. We'll see how the film fares. I think the biggest question now is with these stories, how it's going to do at the box office. I mean, if the audience can get behind it, that would really help it going into award season at this point. But if nobody shows up, I think you can stick a fork in it. It very well might be done. It might get a nomination here and there, but it's really going to have lost almost all of its momentum. And I don't know if people are going to show up. As I said, the Black community itself seems split on Twitter as to what narrative they're going with, because rape is obviously a very big, important issue to everyone. But then also, the Black community didn't show up for Queen of Katwe, which is struggling at the box office, and they didn't show up for The Get Down, which was really struggling on Netflix. Cancellation rumors, they swear that it's not canceled, but I don't know how it's going to get a second season after they shoot the back 6 episodes, considering how low the viewership is. 3.2 million, which is, the most watched is Orange is the New Black with 18 million viewers. So it's just really, really bad. Now, speaking of scandal, someone who also walked into scandal late last week was Tim Burton, who somebody cornered him on the red carpet for the Miss Peregrine premiere. It was a small publication, but they got a real zinger of a question, and he wasn't watching himself either. Where is the PR training in Hollywood? So maybe he also was frustrated. I think that I'm surprised that you see these maybe this Hollywood talent, usually you're not under so much scrutiny. But as we go forward with the digital age and so many news outlets and so much press, you never know where this really bad question is going to come from. And, Tim Burton just unfortunately was not on his toes. And so somebody said, Tim Burton, why is your orphanage full of mystical children all white? And Tim Burton basically was like, when I watched the Brady Bunch, I didn't wonder why there weren't more diverse kids on there. And then when they tried to add diversity, it seemed forced and silly. And I just, that's not something I think about. And it's like, well, Tim, the Brady Bunch was a family, right? So it makes sense they were all the same ethnicity. But I'm sure if you were to make the Brady Bunch today, that would not be the case. But also, you have an orphanage of kids that are pulled throughout time, right, to go and live there. So why wouldn't it be diverse, right? And I think that, so Tim Burton got, in a lot of trouble, and a lot of people were like, I don't know if I can like Tim Burton anymore, which is pretty bad for him. And the film didn't do particularly well at the box office. Now, some could say it's because it's not a particularly good movie, and the ad campaign wasn't great, and they never really defined what the film was. But I think that even beyond what Tim Burton said, if he'd never even said it, I think that the thing is that there isn't any diversity in the movie aside from Samuel L. Jackson. Although also, if Samuel L. Jackson exists in this world, why couldn't there be children of color then also in the world? It makes no sense. But, because it didn't seem particularly diverse, I think that also probably hurt its box office prospects, right? I mean, people like to see themselves in the stories that they're watching. One of my favorite quotes of all time is Dick Wolf on Law & Order, saying, I started adding women to the show, and shocker, women were amazed, I got more viewers, and it seems women like to see themselves. And I was like, wow, that's a real toned down, luckily Dick Wolf said that back before Twitter and the internet and all those things. But what I want to say is this really stuck with me. And I was yesterday, one of the reasons I couldn't do a lot of the coverage last night was that I had a family outing that had been planned way in advance, and we went pumpkin and apple picking in New Jersey, and you could go on a night hayride and all these things. It was this really cool, very American thing to do, right? And the diversity at the farm, Alsteed Farms, if you're in the area, I'll give them a shout out. It's a really awesome facility. They do a really nice job. The diversity there was really amazing, right? You had families of every ethnicity there. And it was like really every ethnicity. It was really cool. You had, Black, Hispanic, Asian, Indian. It was great. And everybody there just wanted to have a nice time. And, everybody, it both contributed, but it never took away. Like, it didn't change. I guess what I'm trying to say is that people feel like, oh, all this diversity is going to make America lose its identity. And I was there, and I was like, nope, still the same awesome thing that you would think it would be, but now everybody's enjoying it, and it's more fun that way. And so I thought that was great. And I wish that maybe, I don't know where Tim Burton does his apple and pumpkin picking, but I don't know why he doesn't go out in the world and look around him and be like, this is what the world is like today. It should be reflected in the stories that we tell. So I think that I very strongly believe in diversity from a business perspective. And we'll see. I think that sometimes you can go too far in the other direction. We'll see what the Luke Cage final numbers are. But as I said, I have some concern that it's, the lack of diversity there could hurt that film's audience. And then also Queen of Katwe, as I said, didn't do well. And, what's it going to take to get other people to go and, other ethnicities to go and see films that are strictly only a single ethnicity? We'll see. But I think that, you got to start with the crossover, and Tim Burton is not contributing. So I'm curious, do you feel any differently about Tim Burton with that? And do you feel that Miss Peregrine should have had a little more diversity to it? All right, so the third story of the day is that Ben Affleck, another movie that's coming out soon, October 14th, is The Accountant. So he's doing the press rounds. And of course, everybody's like, The Accountant isn't a big headline. Let's ask him about Batman. So someone said, what's the title of the Batman movie? And so Ben Affleck said, right now we're calling it The Batman. But because it's such a slow movie news cycle right now, everybody's like, the title of the Batman movie has been revealed. Even though Ben Affleck said, that's what we're calling it right now. We're probably going to change it. But he says, right now we're calling it The Batman, and we're still working on the script, and it's coming along very nicely. So I think it's funny, that Ben Affleck is basically, like, he got his wish, right? Like, he's Batman, right? He said he loved superheroes growing up. It's why he wanted to be Daredevil, and that didn't turn out so well. But now he's Batman. Everyone loves him as Batman. But the question is, will he ever be able to do anything else, right? Or is he now Batman forever? Because he's so good at it. I think Jared Leto will experience the same thing to some degree with the Joker, and Margot Robbie with Harley Quinn. So I think it's a double-edged sword with these comic book properties. Can you ever become anything else? I called him Tony Stark. Robert Downey Jr. is having, I think, a little bit of a similar problem as well with Tony Stark, because he's just so close to actually being Tony Stark, which is one of the reasons he's so good in the role, but I think it might be hurting him outside of it. So it may or may not be called The Batman. We'll see. I don't know how I feel about the title, The Batman. To me, if it was called The Batman, I would love that, because it would focus on, it would mean to me a focus on the Bat family, right? But I think from the rumors that we've been hearing that it's going to be focusing on the Rogues Gallery, because that's like too tempting a direction to go in, because people love Batman villains, right? I mean, look at Suicide Squad. Almost all of its, I think, appeal comes from the Batman villains that are featured in it. So that's the third story of the day. Now, the viewer question, as I said, has to do with awards campaigns. So Sebastian Salinas says, hey, Grace, I have a question. You're always talking about an awards campaign. Well, I was wondering, what is an awards campaign? Like studios pay the Academy, or what? Hope you can answer me. Love your show. And then he just added like a ton of emojis, which I love, like little emoji faces. That's so great. All right, so Sebastian Salinas, good question. Now, as far as studios paying the Academy, that's what everyone says about the Golden Globes, because there's only a limited number of voters in the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, so it's doable. So they don't actually outrightly pay them. They usually give them gifts, right? Or they'll give them like a trip to go, like, oh, come watch our movie in like a great city like Miami, or I'm thinking the Hollywood Foreign Press Association comes from Europe, so they don't want a trip to Europe, but stuff like that, right? So they kind of get bribed. But when it comes to the overall awards campaign season, this is how it works. So a distributor agrees to run the campaign for a movie. That's one of the things that they use as a bargaining chip when they're trying to acquire films at the film festivals. Who's a better awards campaigner? So they have a whole group of people working for the distributor who that's their sole job, to run awards season. And so I think every studio, in fact, has that, because even Lionsgate is trying to get in on award season. So one person, they have a team, and their sole job is to position films for award season. So what that means is a number of things. And so the studio is not paying anybody, but they are paying a salary to these individuals and to fund the campaign. So an awards campaign consists of, the most traditional is ads on in industry trades. Now, in industry trades were print, it would be these big glossy one page or 2 page spreads talking about the movie, and what they do is they suggest the categories it should be nominated in and who should be nominated. Now that it's digital, if you go and you visit Hollywood Reporter or you visit Deadline during awards season, when everybody starts to have to vote, you'll see the ad space is bought, and you'll see them promoting movies it says for your consideration. That's an awards campaign. But then also they want to go and they want to go get interviews in the major magazines, and they want to really, build up the film and how awesome and important it is. So they really want to build that narrative with not just the public, but also everybody who votes, who's part of the public, because there's so many voters, just so widespread. So they want to kind of create that image, right? Get that momentum going. So that's why you'll see a lot of people who are up for awards, or they would hope to would be up for awards, doing 60 Minutes interviews. Like 60 Minutes is a great choice for Nate Parker because it's a serious news show for a serious film, right? So you do stuff like that. You get maybe GQ, Vanity Fair, those kind of magazines, Time, Newsweek. I don't even think Newsweek's still around, actually, but that's that thing. Then also you want to have screenings. This is a big part of it. You have Academy screenings. Now they send DVDs out or Blu-rays for everybody to watch at home, or sometimes now they're starting to do a digital thing where you sign in to try and avoid pirating. But the awards campaign office will design those cases. They do these beautiful cases, and they send it to you with this great packaging, and they really try to make a big deal. And you're like, ooh, this movie looks cool. I'll watch it, maybe vote for it. So they do that. Then they'll have screenings, though, for people who want to see it on the big screen, and they'll have not only the movie play, but often they'll bring the talent for an interview, right? They'll also coordinate all the festivals. They'll decide which festival should it play at. Should it go to the New York Film Festival? Should it go to Toronto? Venice? Like, what are the big festivals? And they coordinate all that, and they coordinate all the interviews for the talent while they're there. So that's what an awards campaign is. It's a lot like a political campaign, and it's obviously, as you can see, has a lot of moving parts. But basically what you're trying to do is make it seem like, how can this film not be nominated? It's like destined to be nominated. That's the idea. And you can see these stories taking shape if you pay attention to not only the main movie news, but also check out the trades. That's a really good place to see what they're pushing hard. And the trades are the Hollywood Reporter, Deadline, Variety, and to some degree the Wrap. The Wrap is trying to get in the same league, and I think they're making some progress, but they're still not quite at the same level as those other three. So the last thing I want to say on this, though, is that I think that the real problem with the Academy Awards in particular is that there is no rule that you have to prove that you've seen all the major movies that are nominated. And especially toward the end when you have the nominations, you don't have to even prove that you've watched all of the officially nominated films. And I think that's one of the reasons that the results aren't always so great. I think they need to have a way to say, like, they check it off, you have to physically show up to make sure that you watched the movie, because I think it's a shame that people can vote in a category when they haven't seen all the contenders. Although, as I've said before, I think that's going to hurt The Birth of a Nation, because I think a lot of people won't even be willing to watch it once, and they can still vote in the categories for which it wants to be nominated and maybe will be nominated in. All right, so anyway, that's today's morning movie news. Thank you for your questions, Sebastian. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please write down below, think of today's top 3 stories and Sebastian's question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.